All right, and welcome to Biblically Offensive. We have the awesome Duke Lamastra back. Today, it's the start of a mini-series where we're going to be talking about the attribute or nature, character of God. We've chosen 8 pieces. This is not meant to be a complete list or to provide all the answers. We really want to take this time to just kind of discuss the limited mental completeness. I don't even have words to go through of who God is and the giant aspects of what that means in our lives. And this is meant to start conversations. So hopefully you can listen to these sessions that we're going to put up, and hopefully it will get you spurred on to think about things more yourself, or we really encourage you to find a friend to maybe watch this with too, and then discuss that. Maybe you agree with all the things that we say, maybe you don't, maybe you agree with most, or maybe you think we're crazy. But if it starts a conversation between you and someone else to where you begin to discuss the amazing, glorious, eternal, infinite nature of God, then I know me and Duke both feel like we've accomplished what we set out to do. Would you agree with that, Duke?
Yeah, 100%, Travis. First of all, thanks so much. Thanks for having me on again. Really, really excited to be here. I'm excited to be kind of embarking on this mini series with you. And I'm just looking forward to see what God does. I mean, we've had a couple of conversations here and there, but we don't even really fully know, what we're going to be discussing here. And yeah, again, I think that's so key. And I love your sort of mindset on this, not coming from a standpoint of, hey, come on in, everybody. We're going to teach you some stuff, some theological points about, this is more so a conversation and just wanting to, even from a worshipful mindset and attitude of coming in and just, it's so important, I think, in our lives. Sometimes, we met at Bible college and stuff like that. And sometimes like the Bible school mentality, or the whatever the mentality is you want to call it, but the mentality of, well, I always need to be, discovering, and I always need to, have my thoughts in order, and just like from a logical standpoint of trying to understand God. And he has opened his word to us, and he has made himself and his nature available to us. And so we should be passionate about discovering him, and the fact that we always get to continually discover him. It's part of our nature to discover who God is. It's the glory of God to conceal him out of the glory of kings is to search out a matter, Proverbs 25. And so it's part of our nature, who we are, to be continuously discovering who God is. And he doesn't conceal himself or an aspect of his nature, of his character, for the purpose of hiding it from us, but so that we can discover it, right? Kind of like I have well, now he's 5, but if I play hide and seek with my 5-year-old, I don't hide in the most like obscure places where I know he's never going to find me, so that an hour later I can come out and make him cry. Like, you didn't find me, you loser. Like, I don't do that to my child because I love him. So I hide out somewhere, somewhat in the open, where, he gets to experience the mystery of, ready or not, here I come. I'm coming to get you. I'm coming to find you. But I don't let it go on for like several minutes. I allow him to discover me. I allow him to find me, because that makes him happy. And there's something that happens on the inside of us when we discover who God is. And so that's something that's so important, but also maintaining that level of just awe and wonder of who he is. Those things are in tandem, and both are absolutely necessary. Because so this is not about us, just putting out all this information and saying, all right, everybody, we're going to get into the faithfulness of God today, right? But, hey, come and discover everything about God's faithfulness. No, we're going to have a conversation and probably leave knowing less than we thought we knew when we got there, because it's just the nature of how this works. But like you said, I'm with you 100%. If one person can listen to this
Mm-hmm.
and just become more impassioned, maybe have a greater fire burn on the inside of them
Mm.
to say, I want to discover more about Jesus, then that's what
Yeah.
we're here for. So
Yeah. Awesome, man. Yeah. I think it was stated, but just to say it again, we are not claiming to have these aspects of God um, fully understood, but by any means, like not even close. um, I think like what you said was really cool, just talking about how this is meant to open us up to going, wow, God is bigger than I thought he was. There's that kind of an old saying of, you know, most of the time it's people's problem is that their devil is too big and their God is too small. And we, I think want to help you have your God be bigger. And again, there's probably going to be points where, not probably, there will be points
for sure.
where we go through and we're going to say, isn't that crazy? Yeah, it's just awesome. It's just so beyond us. And we're still going to talk about those things. I mean, one of the things on our list here is God being infinite and God being eternal. Those are too big for humans, period. We can't understand eternity because our whole mindset is encapsulated in time and infinite. We can't imagine something with no beginning, no end, that just goes on forever. Like, well, there has to be an end, you know. So as we go through this, really, I know Duke and I will both be learning from each other. We really hope to maybe just spur you on to think. Leave some comments below about topics that you would like us to add on or discuss, or something. Maybe you're like, man, this one topic, I've never understood that. And Duke and I will do our best to try to answer that, but neither one of us would say that we have all the answers. Um, it's we're not perfect by any means, but we definitely have enough humility to understand that we're not all knowing. So um, I'll just go over real quick the topics that we've chosen for these so far 8 sessions. May go longer if some people have some good comments or suggestions, or if we go through and go, hey, here's another topic that we should discuss. But in order, today we'll be talking about God's faithfulness and his unchanging nature. Next, it would be God is love, his nature of just him being love, God's just nature, God's good nature, nature of being infinite, his nature of holiness, his nature of being eternal, and the nature of God and just who he is being glorious. So those are the 8 topics we have right now. Please let us know if there are any other comments or any other topics that you would like us to discuss in the comments below. So for anyone who doesn't know Duke, please tell us a little bit about who you are, and just kind of how people can find you. Duke is he's a pastor, author. He runs his own podcast, and he's just an all-around awesome guy that I really look up to. And I mean, I don't know how many years ago it was that we met now, long enough. And but he has always been a solid guy from the first day that I met him. So Duke, go ahead and tell us about your awesomeness.
Okay, man. You had to throw that in there, huh?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. No, so let me talk about how awesome Travis is real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're
No,
losing you. We're
but
losing
for,
you.
no, for real. If you have not yet subscribed to Travis's podcast, the biblically offensive podcast, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like and share it. We need to support this thing and just make sure that as many people can hear it as possible. And Travis is not one to self promote at all. But I'm just telling you, if you're getting anything out of this, please just support in any way that you can. I just want to encourage you to do that. So, Travis, I just as you were talking, it just reminded me at the end of our freshman year at Bible college,
Uh-oh.
how, I don't know if you remember this, how I was like freaking out, like literally like the last couple of days, like I think we were in finals and I was freaking out about, do I come back next year or do I not? And I had to make decisions and I was kind of under the gun.
Mm.
And you just said something to me that I still remember. It stuck with me all these years, and it really made me think. It really challenged me. And because in my mind I still wasn't a minister yet. In my mind I was still, I had gone to Bible college for a year and I was planning on leaving and going to a real college
Mm-hmm.
in my mind,
Yeah.
to study business or whatever else, even though I had I really had no desire for that. I just felt like whatever. I didn't,
Mm-hmm.
I was still dealing with some stuff in my mind about what God was really calling me to do. And even though I was there and I was in the atmosphere of it, on the inside, I was kind of still running from it.
Mm-hmm.
And you just said, listen, Duke, I've never, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to tell you that I have the answers, but you said, I've never seen somebody with your level of leadership, or it was something that you said to me that just really made me, that really challenged me to just really get into God's face and to find out what he was saying. And I was really struggling in that season of my life and hearing God's voice. I was beating myself up and just feeling condemned and like, why can't I hear, and all this kind of stuff. And I shut myself in one of the prayer rooms and just worshiped, and I was crying out to God. And I finally got to the point, like past my emotion, where I heard God speak to me clearly. And I just really appreciate you, man, for your faithfulness as a friend, and how you've been there. And even with this, like we hadn't spoken to each other for a long time just because of life and different things.
Mm-hmm.
But then just reconnecting this way, it's like no time was lost almost. You know what I mean? It's like you're my brother, and we're close, and there's that bond there. Like I feel like I could tell you anything and stuff like that. So I just really appreciate you. So yeah, what was your question? Your question was about my awesomeness.
Your awesomeness.
So I had to deflect a little bit because I didn't want to. No, but so anyway,
thanks for making me feel awkward instead of you. All right.
I
Go
did
ahead.
my best. So if you are, if you're interested, I do have a podcast. It's at simplepowerpodcast.com. And I do weekly episodes that come out every Monday. And it's really just, sometimes it's just me talking. And a lot of times right now I'm getting into doing a lot more interviews. And just really my passion is to help people, to help believers experience the presence of God, the power of God operating in their lives. I believe that is for every single believer. That if you're born again, the Spirit of God lives inside of you. And so you get to experience his presence, but you also get to carry his presence, which means that you get to put on display the goodness of God. And that outworks in simple ways sometimes, like just telling somebody that you love them or being there for somebody when they're hurting. But it also, the outworking of that is also experiencing miracles happen, laying your hands on the sick and seeing them recover, and prophetic words and all that kind of stuff. So I get into that kind of stuff on the podcast. So if you're interested in maybe learning a little bit about the supernatural and miracles and worship and just like the atmosphere, the posture of the believer as far as experiencing intimacy with God and stuff like that, I get into stuff like that. So we can do that. You can find me on, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all that kind of stuff, just pretty much by searching for Duke Lamastra, and we'll go from there. But yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, let's just dive right in because I'm not good at transitions. So,
Good segue.
Yeah, exactly. Today, we're going to be talking about God as faithful and unchanging. And these are some topics where people may think, oh, they're so closely related or they're the same thing. And we'd actually talked about that a little bit of, we kind of said, should we do it as two different ones? And we think that they're just so connected, that God being faithful and unchanging, really we can put those together. So today we want to dive in, say, what is faithfulness? What does it mean for God to be unchanging? And what does that mean practically for us? Great, God's faithful. Okay, God is unchanging. Great. Okay, so what does that mean in the life of the believer, and also the unbeliever? And I'm going to throw this over to you first, Duke, of just kind of um, tell us a little bit about the faithfulness and unchanging nature of God, and some of your thoughts, just to kind of get in and really dive in and start talking about this.
Sure. Yeah. Well, let me tell you where I'm at on this whole thing. One of the definitions for the word faithful is the word trustworthy. And we talk about, probably in natural, regular human life, when
Mm-hmm.
we talk about faithful, generally we'll talk about how somebody was faithful. Maybe they were faithful to their company for a number of years, or a husband being faithful to his wife. That's probably where we hear it the most, is the fidelity aspect, the you know being faithful, remaining faithful to your spouse, and
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. And talk about a faithful father, faithful son, daughter, whatever. But it basically means that you've been constant, you've been consistent throughout that thing. And for us on a human level, obviously it never means that we've been perfect.
Yeah.
But when we talk about God, he is absolutely perfect. So he's faithful to us on a perfect level. He is perfectly trustworthy. Like when David talks in Psalm 23 about God, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall
Mm.
not want.
Yeah.
And then he goes into all these different things. He makes me lie down in green pastures, all this. He's our shepherd. He's the one who faithfully leads and guides us. Now, if you think about a sheep, a sheep is a dumb creature.
Sure. Yeah.
Sheep is a dumb creature
Mm-hmm.
that really, they don't really have too many redeeming qualities. They can't really
Mm-hmm.
do anything on their own. That's an animal that is designed, like most animals are probably better off if we were to just like leave them alone in the wild and let them do their thing.
Yeah.
Sheep are designed to be led.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they'll be rebellious, and they'll kick against their shepherd, and they'll disobey and stuff like that. But once the shepherd trains that sheep, and there's a process
Mm-hmm.
of that, but once the shepherd trains that sheep,
Yeah.
the really good thing about a sheep is that once they learn the voice of their shepherd, they
Mm-hmm.
will not follow the voice of another.
Mm-hmm.
you know
Yeah.
and so they'll get confused, and they'll get distracted, and they'll follow another sheep off a cliff, or they'll go somewhere and fall into a ditch, and they'll fall over. And like a
Uh-huh.
sheep, if it falls down, it can't pick itself back up, so it'll eventually die if it doesn't have a shepherd there to pull it back up. So when we think about that, just from our perspective, and the Bible refers to us as sheep, and that he's our shepherd, like over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're his people, we're the sheep of his pasture. And
Mm-hmm.
in John chapter 15, Jesus says, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me, and they won't
Mm-hmm.
follow the voice of a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
And that's even a prophetic declaration over our lives. Because when I look at myself, I'm like, well, that's not actually true, because I do get distracted by other voices, and I do things
Mm-hmm.
I'm not supposed to do, and I don't always hear your voice
Yeah.
totally clearly, and everything like that. But he's like, no, this is your nature, this
Mm.
is who you are.
Yeah.
But the other side of that relationship is, my nature is, I'm your shepherd, and I
Yeah.
love you so much, and I'm so faithful to you. Like the Bible
Mm-hmm.
talks about the nature of the and I don't even know where this came from, bro, but Jesus, it talks about him leaving the 99 to
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
after the one.
Mm-hmm.
He's so intensely faithful to you as an
Mm.
individual
Yeah.
that he will never, ever leave you and forsake you. So he's completely trustworthy. He's completely constant. So that's my initial thoughts.
Nice. About to pass the Patreon bucket around. um, yeah, man. I think it's awesome to be able to take that and say, he leaves the 99 to go after the one, and putting that to, that's how faithful God is. Like, because I think that kind of goes to what you were saying before. Like, sometimes I do get distracted and I go to these other, what is it, and the Bible doesn't say that someone dragged the sheep off. It's like, hey, the sheep probably wandered, and he went after the sheep to bring him back to where he's designed to be and will
Yes.
thrive. You know what I mean? And I definitely think that the idea of God being faithful, like, when I think of the word, and this is just something in my head, but God being faithful means that you can have full faith in everything that he does, and um, it's this concept of like, there will never be a time where God is not faithful. And that's why we kind of put faithful and unchanging together. We did, because great, if all these things are true that we're going to talk about, and possibly more things, but if God is faithful sometimes, well, that's actually not that comforting, because he may decide to not be faithful
Right.
in your situation, maybe someone else,
Yeah.
and he's like, oh, great, God decided to be real faithful to these people, but this thing's going on with me. And um, so he decided to not be faithful
Yeah.
to me, because he could just, maybe his nature changes. Can God wake
Yeah.
up on the wrong side of his almighty bed and be like, you know what, I don't know why, but I'm just kind of like pissed off at Travis today, so he doesn't get a lot of my faithfulness.
Wow.
He was a butthead yesterday. Okay,
That's
great.
how we think. That's
Yeah.
how we think, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, God did not call himself or he called himself the I am, not the I might be. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we have to live our lives based on what the book says about him.
Mm-hmm.
Because if not, we will go astray in our thinking, and we can start to think exactly that
Yeah.
he might be faithful to me, but you know what? I messed up. I didn't read my Bible every day this week, so he might
Mm.
not do this for me.
Yeah.
No, actually, one of my favorite verses on this is in 2 Timothy chapter 2, and I forget, it's maybe verse 12, 13, somewhere in the middle
Mm-hmm.
part of that chapter,
Yeah.
where he says, when we are faithless,
Mm.
he remains faithful.
Mm-hmm.
And then it says he cannot deny himself.
Himself. Yeah.
Like you said, he can't not be faithful.
Yeah.
It's who he is.
Yeah.
He will never deny himself.
Yeah.
God does not change. And yeah, so those two things, they're so connected, the faithfulness of God and the fact that he doesn't change. We can
Yeah.
count on his faithfulness. And
Mm-hmm.
the challenge for us is getting to that point in our minds where we don't just sing about his faithfulness on Sunday morning,
Yeah.
but we actually carry it with us through the week, remembering, and we might have moments of disconnect, sure, where we get into fear on something. You
Yeah.
get that letter in the mail, you get that court summons, you get that bill you didn't expect, you
Yeah.
get that phone call you weren't expecting,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, that news, you get that news that you weren't expecting. And it's easy to just start that thing, that questioning, oh, well, what if this happens? What if this
Mm-hmm.
goes wrong? What if I can't do this? What if? And that's a normal sort of human response,
Mm-hmm.
but we need to be able to quickly remind ourselves, yeah, but hold on, God is faithful.
Yeah.
And when we get to that point of standing on his faithfulness and living from his faithfulness,
Mm-hmm.
then everything in our life shifts. The way we think changes, the way we view our problems changes, the way we view
Yeah.
tragedy, even these things
Mm-hmm.
change, because we can always recognize, not that we don't go through stuff, not that we don't
Yeah.
deal with tragedy, not that we don't feel bad sometimes, not that whatever,
Mm-hmm.
but in the midst of it, we can always come back to this place of peace and say,
Mm-hmm.
God, I'm trusting in you, not my circumstances.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it it really, it comes to that point too of God is, God is faithful, and we'll get into this a little more in the coming weeks, but okay, God is faithful and unchanging. And later we'll get into why that's a good thing, because of who he is. But suffice it to say, the reason God being faithful and unchanging is good is because who God is good and beautiful. He's faithful to that, and he's unchanging in that. So, right, because someone could be faithfully and unchangingly a scumbag, and
Yeah.
and it's like, hey, Ted Bundy was pretty darn faithful and unchanging to his life choices, like, and
Wow.
it's like you can be faithful and unchanging, but if who you are is not good, then that means that you will forever be faithfully and unchangingly bad. And so we'll get into why it's a good thing with God being faithful and unchanging. But I think it is sufficient for right now, so we don't bleed over into other topics, to say God is good and he is loving and he cares for you. And like the verse you were saying, he leaves the 99 to go after you when you stray, to bring you back, not to keep you from doing things you love and what you were made to do, but because you will thrive. And the best thing for you is to be with him in his presence as you're created. So
Yes.
I think looking at that, saying God is faithful. So the aspects of who God is, he will remain faithful to that in every situation. And because he is unchanging, that won't change even after we die, even after we go to be with him in heaven. He will still always be faithful and unchanging, because it's who he is. Like, I can't be not Travis. Like, even if I change my name, okay, like, right. it's like, I can't not be me. I can call myself something different, especially in this age. It doesn't matter if I say I'm a different race or different, gender or anything like this. Who I am is who I am. And I cannot change that I am me. And in the same way, God just is faithful. He just is unchanged. That's who he is. He can't deny that aspect of himself. It's just who he is. And so I think realizing that's just who God is, so he will always be that. He is unchanging. And we dip into the aspect of God's outside of time. So for all time, he has already always been, always is, and always will be faithful and unchanging. It's already, to God, that has already happened.
Yeah.
And so,
making my head hurt.
Yes. And so, and to everyone watching, Duke and I talked before this, realizing that it is very hard to not connect these other attributes, because all of God's attributes, they mold together to make God God. And so with that whole idea is, this thing is connected to this and this and this and this and this and this and this. So we will be sometimes mentioning aspects of the other attributes simply because they affect our understanding of it. But Duke, let's talk a little bit about what this means to the believer, possibly the unbeliever, in like our everyday life. And again, it doesn't need to be, here's all the answers and here's how it'll always look, but what are some thoughts you have on, okay, what does this look like in our everyday life? How does this help us? How is God faithful and unchanging in our lives mean something relevant to us today?
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's a verse in James chapter 1 that probably a lot of people would be familiar with. It's um that with him there's no variation, there's no shadow of turning. It's James 1:17, but the first part of that verse, it talks about how he's a gift giver. It says, every good gift and every perfect gift comes from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with who there is no variation or shadow of turning. And that's his nature. And like you said, he doesn't change. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He does not change. He's the same God. He's the same God that created you. And so, you know, I think that this becomes so relevant for us in our lives, not just because like it's not for the sake of looking at God like he's just there to give me stuff all the time, right? But it is recognizing, because there's different ways that we could live our lives. We could live our lives where we have our I was talking about this yesterday with somebody, where we have our spiritual stuff compartmentalized from the regular stuff, the natural stuff. And then so, I do my spiritual practices, like I go to church and I read the Bible and I pray. But then I do the normal, the regular, the natural stuff, like I take care of my kids and I go to work and I do the chores and I run errands and these different things.
Yep.
And we disconnect them, and we create this disconnect between secular and sacred, or like natural and spiritual, right?
Yeah.
And we create these disconnects. But here's the deal: we are spiritual beings created in the image of God, and he's with us everywhere that we go. So as far as I'm concerned, for me as a believer, there is no such thing as secular. There is no such thing as, because everything that I do is connected to God. So I can either live my life the way where I compartmentalize and I put God in certain things, but not in other things, or I can recognize that as I walk through life, everything that I do, every decision that I make, everywhere that I go, it's actually an opportunity for me to experience his presence, his goodness, his faithfulness in everything that I do, and also for me to practically demonstrate that in my life to others. Now, and I'm not saying that I do that perfectly by any means, but it's this thing of, it has to become real to us on a level, and I don't mean to repeat myself, but on a level where it's not just us, where we sing about it, but which is important. I mean, that's good, that builds faith, it's awesome. But then to take that, and then when it's Monday morning, and when stuff starts to not necessarily go right, because we all have issues throughout the week, and when we're walking through life, to recognize, hold on, I'm still connected to you, God, and I recognize that there is no shadow of turning with you. So you're not just smiling on me and showing me your faithfulness when I'm singing you pretty songs in church, because that's when you're happy with me. But then when I just accidentally slipped up and cussed that guy out, or when I cut that guy off in traffic, or that guy cut me off in traffic and I got mad, or I accidentally snapped at my wife or my kids, or whatever, and then all of a sudden, like, God just turns his face from me, and now it's his anger that I'm dealing with, or his like indifference toward me, or whatever. I think a lot of believers they go through life with this idea, and unbelievers too, go through life with this idea of like of a God sitting there like this, like, really, you just did that, like, for real? And instead, we need to recognize that even when we are faithless, he is still the same. He doesn't change. There is zero shadow of turning. He doesn't even think about like pulling his faithfulness back from you. You know what I mean? And it's and of course, that's not just like this thing where it's like, okay, so just do whatever you want. No, but it is this thing of living our lives in a place of rest, knowing that he is absolutely trustworthy, so that as we go through life, he's got our back, even when we're not doing everything perfectly. And I just really think that, just from a practical standpoint, it takes so much pressure off of ourselves when we recognize the true nature of who God is, that he's a close companion. Like, one of the things on the faithfulness of God that I was thinking about is, God will give us these incredible, promises, these incredible things that he'll say, do this. And we look at it and we say, well, that's impossible. or he'll give us things like his word will show us how we should live in different things, and how Jesus, even like how Jesus talks about, you've heard it said that Moses, well, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. You've heard it said, don't commit adultery. But I tell you, and then grace takes it to a whole another level where it's like, don't even look on a woman to lust after her, because you've already committed adultery in your heart. And you're like, well, that's almost impossible. You know what I mean? And it's like these difficult things, but then the Spirit of God, he's like, okay, I'm giving you these commands and I'm giving you these promises that are impossible, but hey, guess what? I'm actually going to live inside of you.
Yeah.
Right. So he's so faithful to the point that he lives in us. He partners with us, or we partner with him, however you want to look at it, where the Bible calls the Holy Spirit our comforter, our helper, our advocate, our paraclete, the one alongside of us. And it's just like, he doesn't, so many people just think, and I'm sorry I'm talking so long, but so many people think that, it's our job to try to measure up. It's our job to try to be faithful. And
it's like a merit-based system.
Absolutely, bro. And it's like every religion, of the world is really based on that system. It like a point system, of this thing. There's gold stars and there's demerits, and if you do good, then God's pleased. Then if you, we're doing things to try to measure up, and we bring that into our relationship with God, and it ends up hurting us because we live under condemnation when we don't do everything right, or even when we do things right, we judge it, and we and we allow those lies to come in and distract from really what God is wanting to do. But God's opinion is, well, I'm going to die on the cross for you. I'm going to take your penalty. I'm going to take your sacrifice. I'm going to declare it is finished, and I'm going to give you my grace. I'm going to live inside of you, so that this whole life that you're living, with all these impossible promises that I've given you, things to accomplish and all these things, they're not carrots that I'm dangling in front of you like, come on, come get it. You're never going to get it though. So, because he lives inside of us, and he walks with us, and he leads us, and he guides us and directs us as our faithful shepherd, constantly directing us where we're supposed to go. And he just takes responsibility for so much of this stuff that we beat ourselves up about.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. And hey, I say it's only bad if you talk long and don't have something good to say. All that was great. So, for me, I think about how, and you had alluded to it when you were talking about it, there needs to be something in you that has decided to stand by that knowledge and that conviction in your heart that God is faithful and unchanging. Just boom. That's it. There's no caveats. There's no, he's faithful and unchanging if. Because what happens is, and we've talked about this a little before, but sometimes his faithfulness is not preventing or removing you from a situation. Sometimes his faithfulness is getting you through that situation, and that being faithful and his unchanging nature means that God is faithful, as it says in his word, to finish the work that he started.
Yes.
So the crazy thing on that is God is faithful because he started the work in you as a believer. He started that work in you, and you could maybe even say before you were a believer, because as God is calling you to himself, as he is saying, hey, come this way, and he is beginning to share himself with you. He has started that work, and it says he is faithful to complete it. And so if you just take that step back, he started and he will complete.
Yeah.
So don't be dumb and think that you're going to do all this space in the middle.
Wow.
But that's what happens.
Yeah.
We think, oh, all right, well, salvation. Sometimes we even think that was us, salvation. which is dumb, because the Bible also says no one can come unto God unless he is drawn by God.
Yes.
And so you may even think that you're the one who walked into that church, or that you were the one who had a dream, or I mean, because there's a bunch of ways that God draws people to himself. But then the thing is, he did it.
Yes.
The only way that you were able to come to God is because he started that process and
So good.
empowered you to come. And then the only way that this completes, which the completeness is when, the end of days happens, and you get a new body, there's a new heaven, a new earth, and all that, and he completes that work in every single aspect. And what happens is in the middle of that, then all of a sudden we go, but we got to do this part. Okay, like, not that I don't fall into this trap, but I say this to myself as well. That's dumb. It's just, it's stupid. It's like saying that trying to have a slug fly, it's not going to happen. Like, we can't do it. It's not something that we can do without God. He starts it, he sanctifies us and takes us along this path of growth, because the Bible also says all good things come from God.
Yes.
So, and I like to do this thing. If you invert something, right? So all good things come from God. So then you can't get any good thing without God.
Mm. Yes.
And you can take it a step further. Apart from God, all you get is bad things. So there's this step, but to think like God starts it, he takes us along the process,
Yeah.
pulls us through that, because he's faithful through all the
Yes.
situations.
Yeah.
Apart from me, you can do no good thing, but with me or through me or because of me, you can do some things. No, all things, right?
Yeah.
And it's because, like you said, he lives in us. But that's why it's, we're saved by faith. And it talks about this other component of that sanctification. It's we are then transformed away from who we were without God and towards the goal of that perfection by being transformed by the renewing of our mind. And
Yes.
it's that concept of God is faithful, and we have to now renew our mind to saying things depend on me. I have to be faithful. I have to do these things. Guess what? You're the slug who can't fly, and it's not to put us down, say you're terrible, da da da. God said, you can't do this. I want to do this because he loves us, because he is faithful,
Wow.
because he is unchanging. And so there's this whole process where God will complete this, and he's faithful. And we've talked about this before, but there have been some situations, and I'm sure in all of our lives, that were either fairly traumatic or highly disappointing, or something that really had a huge negative effect in our lives. And we have to, if you don't fully have that thing cemented in your heart that says God is faithful and God is unchanging in that faithfulness, then you will not react properly in that situation. And it talks about, you want to know how much you believe something? Well, the Bible says that it's from the overflow of your heart, of what you truly believe, your mouth will speak. So what do you say? What do you say about those situations? What do you say about those things? And if you have that thing cemented, how you react, how you speak will really help you kind of gauge where you're at, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%, man. I when we talk about stuff like this, I always kind of want to, come to a point of, and you're hitting on it there, of like, what should our response be, right?
Yeah.
What,
Hmm.
how do we respond to his faithfulness? And yeah, like out of the abundance of the heart, or the overflow of the heart, like you said, the mouth speaks. Um, there's a verse in I think it's Hebrews 10:23, where the Hebrew writer says, "Let us hold fast the confession or the profession of our." Some translations say hope, some say faith. I'm just going to say faith. Let us
Hmm.
hold fast the confession of our faith without wavering, for he who promised is
Yeah.
faithful. You
Yep.
know, and so that becomes the foundation that we stand on. He who promised is faithful.
Hmm.
So all that stuff in the middle, all that stuff in the middle, who's the preacher that said, I think Joseph Garlington
Hmm.
says, God takes us from glory to glory, but it's hell in the hallway, you know?
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's good.
um, and so, but through all that process, where so many times it's us trying to figure it out and creating messes for ourselves, and then asking God to come in and bless the mess that we made,
Yeah.
where, if we actually learn to recognize that the foundation of it all is he's faithful, he does not change. So now that doesn't mean that we put him in a box and we try to say, well, because he did it this way last time, he has to do it that way again. No, that's not the point. But the point is that because he was faithful last time, he will be faithful again. He is faithful now. He will always be faithful. So, it might not look the same every single time. And you said this, Travis, about being led through conflicts and different things. There were times, even in Israel's history, where God brought them around a conflict. And I have no idea where it says this, so I apologize, but there's a verse that says that, a specific time where God brought them around
Hmm.
because he knew that their heart wasn't strong enough to endure going through. And
Yeah.
so there are times where God will lead you around, but there's times when he'll lead you where, when the path to victory or
Hmm.
whatever is going through something.
Hmm.
But the connotation there is, you will never go through something unless God is fully convinced that what he's put inside of you is big enough and strong enough to bring you through it. So
Hmm.
that what's inside of you is good enough, so like
Yeah.
to keep trusting him. So if you're going through a conflict, and
Hmm.
we don't, it's too much of a can of worms to try to get into like, the thing of, the stuff about conflicts and different things, and
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
everything. But just understand, if you're going through something, God is so good and he's so faithful. And if you'll hold fast that confession, that word
Hmm.
confession is the Greek word homologio, and it means to
Bless you.
say, yeah, thanks. Homologio. um, that makes me sound smart when I say stuff like that. um, but it's just this, it means to say the same thing as, right? So we keep saying the same thing as God. Like, so if you're going, just in a practical way, if you're going towards something, you're going toward a promise of God for your life. Maybe God told you to start a business and you're not seeing the results as quickly as you thought you would, or as you wanted to, or whatever. Don't start like, what, like what Travis said, where he's like, the out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So now I'm like, oh, well, this isn't working. This isn't God. I need to give up. I need to quit. I need to stop doing this. God's not faithful, blah, blah, blah. That's a temptation that we can all, fall into, to look at, our circumstances, and to define God based on our circumstances or what we're going through. But instead of doing that, recognize that the foundation that we live on for all of it is that he is faithful. And because that's who he is, he cannot change. Then I keep confessing and declaring and reminding myself and responding based on what he's told me, based on what he says, and based on what his word says about who he is. Oh, I think you're muted.
There we go. I it's it's this idea, you were saying like we define God by our circumstances,
Yeah,
but how important is it to define our circumstances by God?
absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so
Yes.
and we tend to do that. A lot of times I think we look at something, and a lot of times you can just go and flip something the other way. it's pretty easy. Like if I'm doing A and that's not good, and the other side of the coin is B, a lot of times it's that simple. I won't say it's always that, or if you do the opposite of this, but it's like, a lot of times, it's that idea of we look at bad things and they become big. Okay, well, guess what? And you don't even have to worry about making the bad things smaller. If you just make God 100 times bigger than that bad thing, that will
So
go
good.
away. And I think we have to realize that,
So good.
like, Bill Johnson, he said something a while ago, and we've talked about this before, and may have even mentioned it on one of the other podcasts we've done, but he said that you become what you focus on. And I'm sure other people have said it, but that's where I know it from. So if someone else sees it and they go, oh, no, this person said it or whatever. Hey, bud. But he said, you become what you focus on. So if you focus on the negative, you will have more of a negative outlook, and it's kind of like that. The old saying is, don't think about a pink elephant. And you keep saying that to yourself. Don't think about a pink elephant. Don't think about a pink elephant. And it's like, no.
What are you thinking about?
Yeah. Think about a different thing and let that thing enrapture your vision and grab your heart.
Love it.
You won't have to try to not think about something. One of the huge things, and this is a side tangent, but it's one of those huge things that may help someone, is that pornography is huge in the church right now. I mean, the numbers are staggering, even among pastors and youth pastors and, the youth students and attenders and just the world as a whole, especially in America. The rates are insane, and that's men and women and all this. The problem with a lot of programs I've seen is it's building self-control to resist a temptation instead of pointing towards God.
Yes.
Letting you, a lot of these things, they leave an empty space and they don't fill it with anything.
Wow.
And so what happens is, if you remember what Jesus said, he talks about if you cast a demon out of a man.
Yes.
And then you don't fill that spot up with God, it says he'll bring 7 demons worse than him. So the first guy's like, wow, I got kicked out. It's kind of like the little brother who's the bully. And then, someone actually comes up and defends the other kid and then kicks the bully's butt and he runs back, but he brings, he's like the Duggars or whoever, and it's like the family with a bunch of family members. And he's like, hey, let me bring 7 of my older brothers or cousins and all this kind of stuff. And now we come back, and now the second state of that man is worse than the first. And I see so many, and it's not just the sexual immorality ministries, but it's so many things right now are focused with stopping an action instead of starting a better one to replace it. And so what happens is we become empty, and all we do is clean out a vessel to then pour the other thing back in, because we have these habits. And so it's basically like we have habits, and just scientifically they say it takes about 21 consistent days to form a new habit. And so what happens though is, think about it this way: you're getting rid of something and you're not filling it with anything else. There's no other focus. And as people, we're meant to focus on something else. So do it this way. Don't try to not have faithlessness. Go towards cultivating being, understanding God's faithfulness. Like you have this thing in yourself where it's like, I doubt. Oh, don't doubt, don't doubt, don't doubt. And you just leave this open spot, but you haven't given yourself anything to believe in, to have faith in. And so I think when I look at it, if kind of as we come to an end here on this one, is if you are going to try to have God's faithfulness and unchanging nature affect your life in the everyday, You need get verses on God's faithfulness, right? And you know, a lot of people I know they journal and they put everything in there. Great, have that, but have one journal or one thing if you like to write. I don't really like to write, so sometimes I do like voice notes or something
Yeah,
like
me
that, where I
too.
can hit a button and speak, because I don't write extremely fast, so I kind of like lose it. But if I can just go off and speak, but whatever it is, have something that just holds all of the faithful moments of God, and then have this, you know, basically this like book or these files that you can just go through and listen and build that, and guess what, that will get bigger. And the cool thing is if you have, say you do journals, keep the journals, file them away, and then as time goes on, build that space up on your rack of the faithfulness of God. Sometimes having that physical representation
Yeah.
can be great. And if you like voice stuff and you put it down, there are services that are really cheap where they will literally print the whole thing out for you in a book and like type notes.
Yeah.
And so
It's
even
good.
put it up there, you know, whatever it is, don't leave an empty space.
Hmm.
You need to remove it and fill in. There's that whole, and I'll finish with this, that illustration. A lot of times it's about sin in our lives, that you see a lot of the pastors do, where they have a cup with some dirt in the bottom.
Yeah.
Right. And so here's the thing. Let's say you get the glass and you dump it all out, and you know, put water in there, and you even wash it and make it all nice and clean. And then you set it on the counter and you leave it there.
Mm-hmm.
That will get dirty very soon.
Yep.
And, you know, you don't, but that's what we do with ourselves a lot of times. We go and someone prays for us. We have an experience. Oh, and we're delivered and all this stuff. And then we sit empty.
Yes.
And that means that there's just more room for things that are not good to come back in. If you open yourself up to anything, the bad comes in. The bad is the thing that tries to come in uninvited and beat its way in. God is very respectful. He's even faithful in his respectfulness to you, where a real relationship isn't forced. But the devil doesn't care about relationship. He wants to destroy you, as the word says, that he, you know,
Yes.
prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. He wants to kill you. God wants to nurture you and bring you into something, into fulfillment. And that can't happen apart from a mutual decision. And so that's what I would just say. Point yourself towards the good, and that will automatically get you away from the bad. Now, it doesn't mean don't ever take any steps, depending upon what, you know, if you're, and I don't mean this facetiously, if you're like on drugs, we have a huge opioid epidemic in this country right now. If you're on opioids or drugs or meth or crack or anything like that, you know, or just something you want to get off, even if you just are like, hey, I want to make a healthy choice in my life and stop smoking, set things up, you know, get a nicotine patch or put yourself in a rehab program. But where it does, sometimes we need to remove ourselves, and the removing yourself is not the bad part. It's removing yourself and then leaving yourself open to just let anything come back in. Remove yourself from one thing and go towards another, you know.
Mm.
And so that would just be my practical application on what we're talking about today with God's faithfulness and unchanging. Get that cemented in your heart, so that even when you don't understand a situation, you're able to say, this situation in God's plan is beyond me, but you can have hope through every situation, knowing 100% in your heart
Mm.
that he is faithful, even when you don't understand, and that characteristic of his will be unchanging.
So good.
So awesome. Any other thoughts before we finish, Duke?
Just to no, I think that was really good. Just to kind of echo what you were saying at the end there. I love that. I keep, you know, I keep journals and I do voice notes and I do all that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But I'm going to start doing that. What you said specifically, something to document God's faithfulness. I think that that's such a cool practical thing.
Mm.
When you have a track record of your history with God,
Yeah.
but something that you can go back to and look at, it's so powerful because, we can get bogged down by all the negative stuff that happens in life, and it can very easily overshadow what God has done, and, when he has showed himself faithful. And then so when we get into a situation where, we've got to make a decision, or we get into a difficult decision, or a difficult circumstance or whatever, then if the negativity is speaking louder than God's faithfulness to you, then you're going to make bad decisions. You're going to make decisions out of fear. You're going to make decisions, out of self-preservation and whatever.
Yeah.
But having something, because the nature of God, when he reveals himself to you, when he brings you through something, when he, again, reveals himself in a new way to you, that becomes something now that you can stand on. It's like a stepping stone for the next thing, because the nature of God is always from glory to glory. It's always to increase, to bring you to the next level. It's not to make you go backwards. And so we'll take 2 steps forward with God, but then we'll take a step back because we have a setback. But God's like, no, remember what I did.
Yes.
And he even did that when the disciples were on the boat, like after the whole situation where like the feeding of the 5,000 and all that happened. He's like, do you not remember? And he draws their attention back to the miraculous thing that he did, but they had forgotten about it because, oh, well, that was then. But in God's mind, the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. So when you have a testimony to stand on, even if it's not your own testimony, like if you don't, you can stand on someone else's testimony and it can prophesy to your life, or it can declare the faithfulness of God into your life. But then as you begin to have experiences with God, he did something here. So he was faithful here. So now I know, because he is unchanging, I need to remember what he did, because then something else is inevitably going to come up where now instead of starting back here, I can start from here, because I have this history with God now. So now I can go from here to the next point. And then now I have a new stepping stone that I can go forward. And it just becomes this thing when we live our lives that way. Life with Jesus, even though like it's not always easy, just like nobody's life is easy all the time, but it does.
Yours isn't? I mean, I don't know. Oh man.
No, bro. Sometimes it is, but not a lot of the time. It's not. It's just but it's simple when we keep it simple, stupid, when we keep it simple, then it's easy. And the simple is, listen, trust, and obey. Be led by the Spirit of God in your life. And it doesn't mean that it's always going to be easy. There's risk involved, and there's these decisions involved where it's like, God, for real? Do I really need to do that right now? But it becomes this adventurous thing, but it only works when we can count on his faithfulness. So.
Yeah, man. Good. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. I know we could keep going on forever, but I think great conversation. Again, I appreciate you coming on, and
thanks for having me, man.
Blowing my mind again, as per the usual. And so for everyone, thanks. If you're still listening, appreciate you making it to the end. Please like, comment, share, and let us know if there's anything you'd like to have us discuss, or any questions about this video. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again soon.